Okay.
Absolutely. You're in the picture and we are on the move.
Excellent.
By the way, I told you last time you were on the program that if I have an occasional, 'cause
No problem, huh? It's all good. It's all good.
that
Hey,
is a good one, man. Because as Cowboys, we'd be saying, "Huh?" So yeah, that's pretty good.
what part of Indiana are you in?
Right in the center of this godforsaken state called Indianapolis. By the
Oh,
way, Indianapolis. So they said it was named not after Indians, but after Diana in Dianapolis.
Well, you've got some interesting stuff going on in your city. I mean, you've got like a little miniature version of Washington, D.C.'s mall right downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Your war memorial is pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Same with your soldiers monument right downtown, the Circle Square. I used to live in the Noblesville area, worked in the Fishers, worked around Fishers area, so I know a little bit about your city.
Hey, I'll tell you what, Carl, one day I was downtown, and no less than 4 buildings. There's an Indianapolis flag. It's a circle. It looks like a cross with a circle. 4 of those up on flagpoles were upside down on the same day.
What?
Yeah, and that's no coincidence, okay? So,
I
mean, that's total Illuminati globalist communicating, and and I think if we get into the discussion tonight, we'll find that there's a lot of communication out there with the globalists right in front of us, and
Right.
I wonder if we can maybe pick up some tips and find out how they are communicating, perhaps where they are even hypnotizing us. But we're going to be talking with you tonight about your brand new book, Game of Gods: The Temple of Man in the Age of Reenactment. Highly anticipated book, Carl. I want you to just introduce yourself to our audience once again, just so we get a baseline for you.
Absolutely, sure. I've been working on understanding global transformation, full-time since 1997. Back in 1997, an Indianapolis-based or Indiana-based author by the name of Gary Kaw hired me to do some of the research for his book, The New World Religion. And so I moved down to Indianapolis, or that area, in 1997 till 2001. And for the last 20 plus years, have been doing full-time research, writing and communicating, and particularly helping other authors do the research in terms of understanding global governance, interfaithism. Basically, Daniel, the whole idea of world transformation, building our new Babel, because that's what we're doing. We are building our Babel. Mm-hmm. And this is something that, in terms of where how I kind of jumped into it, back in the early 1990s, I began doing research on Freemasonry because I needed to understand Freemasonry. I'd been asked to join. I had no clue what Freemasonry was about. Wow. No idea. But I was asked to join. I never did.
Oh, good.
But that got me going. In fact, a statement was made by a gentleman from my community. We were sitting having supper. He was a board member on a community-run program that I was a part of. And he looked at me at one point and he says, "Carl, we're not Satanists." And I'm like, "All righty. Where did that come from?" It wasn't in my mind at all. But Daniel, that's where, for myself, the ball got rolling. I had to understand what this was about. So I took the time. I didn't even know there was books written on the subject. From a Christian perspective, I took the time to hunt down their own works of philosophy, history, their rituals, their monographs. It took a long time to figure that all out. But that was my starting point. Mm-hmm. So it's been a game. It's been an adventure. And along the way, going to all kinds of crazy places. I just came back from the Parliament of the World Religions.
Whoa. Now, what were you doing over there?
I was fly on the wall, so to speak. I went to observe, to interact with the people, and try to understand, okay, where is the narrative, the leftist religious narrative going? And the Parliament of the World Religions is kind of like the flagship of the interfaith global religious movement. We had 200 plus religions represented, 7,500 participants, a ton load, and I mean a lot, from the United Nations. We had UN special advisors. We had the person involved with setting up the climate change conferences. She was the executive director of the UN Climate Change Convention. A lot of major players that way. So I was there to be a fly on the wall, to listen, to observe, and on occasion to talk to and challenge folks.
Uh, and now tomorrow you're going to be on the View from the Bunker with Derek Gilbert, aren't you?
That's correct. Yes.
That should
So
be
we'll be talking a little bit about the Parliament there as well. I'm sure. I mean, it's like the hot topic right now.
All right. So wherever trouble is, that's where we're going to find you.
Well, a little bit of trouble, just a little bit.
well, when you get out there, do you make trouble? That's a good question too.
There has been times when all of a sudden I've been tapped on the shoulder and Mr. Teichrib, come with us. We've got questions as to why you're here, but that's only happened a couple of times of the 35, 40 different events I've been to.
Mm-hmm. Now, didn't you go to the Burning Man?
I was at Burning Man this fall. I've been at Burning Man before. I've been to regional Burning Man events and other affiliated kind of cultural events. And yeah, what's really interesting about Burning Man, everybody thinks about it as a great big party. Yes, it's a big party. It's clothing optional. There's all kinds of things going on. It's a crazy place, but it's also where the executives from Silicon Valley, social change agents, all your tech entrepreneurs, they all converge at Burning Man. There's a lot of workshops. I mean, a lot of workshops, panel discussions, networking events, where you can go and hang out with basically the engineers and the executives of all the apps and software and tech products that we all use, and listen to them, basically with no filter, as they talk about their vision for the future and what they'd like to see and how they're changing the world. And really, I kind of look at it as the unofficial United Nations of Silicon Valley, because that's what it is. So you hear lots of stuff. I was at a workshop on, I can't mention the guy's name, but he is right up there in terms of the cryptocurrency community. And he made an interesting kind of connecting point over the course of one of his workshops, that we are entering an era of a new civilization where there's 4 building blocks being put in place. The first one, he said, was a new type of spirituality, a new religious understanding, and that's a psychedelic, Eastern, mystical understanding. That's where we're going. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you've got a point. We are entering a new pagan age. That's in many respects what my book is about. And they said the next building block is a new social ethics, a new vision for how society should be. And that's what we're doing at Burning Man, in the live, in the flesh. It's a sandbox to play with those ideas. And then he said the next stage, and he broke this down over 2.5 hours or so. The next stage is we need a cryptocurrency that would be attached to our ability to buy and sell based on how you fit those 2 other criteria, the new social ethos and the new spirituality. And then underlining all of that, how do we keep things managed? How do we govern it at a global level? Artificial intelligence. So that's how he broke it down. Now, will it form that way? Will it, shake out that way? I don't know. But I do know that, you're talking about some pretty big ideas, some pretty earth-shaking ideas. This sounds like a recipe to control.
I tell you what, we sent a cameraman out to the Burning Man here. I'm going to take you out of the picture. I don't know how you'll see it over there. I'm going to take you out, and you should be able to see. I don't know if you'll recognize this guy or not. Let's see if we can bring him up here. Yeah, we caught this guy out there with our cameras. Do you have any idea who he is?
Man, no, none at all. The guy looks pretty shady to me, Daniel.
Yeah, it doesn't appear he's wearing any clothes. So it looks like he's just wearing a tie, man. I can understand that.
Yeah, that's about it. He looks a little sunburnt as well.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. So anyway, camera crew caught that guy out there doing all kinds of stuff. Like, we can't even mention him. This is a family show, so really, gotta keep
That's right. We can't really discuss what goes on behind the scenes there.
But so you've got, and of course the Burning Man's at the top of that. And the last picture was a Burning Man too. But is there, at the culmination of that, is there any feeling? Did you get any vibes of any spiritual activity going on at that moment, or is it just a visual extravaganza?
Oh, both. It is a visual extravaganza. I mean, it is sensory overload, and the whole week. You need to understand the whole week is sensory overload. And when they burn the man, it is wild. It's a party. It's fireworks. It's really the party aspect of the burn. I personally don't get a feeling of the spiritual side of it when the man is burning, and that's the whole point of the name Burning Man, because at the end of the week, that figure sitting on your computer screen right now, that gets burned. Where things get more spiritual is when the temple burns. And the temple burns on Sunday night. So the man burns Saturday night, the temple burns Sunday night. When the temple burns, everybody is hushed, it's quiet, there are no fireworks, it's not a party, it's very reverential. It has a totally different vibe. When they burn the man, it's woohoo, it's party. When they burn the temple, there's tears, you hear weeping. It's a solemn event. And to them, this is their hub. The temple is their spiritual grounding. So all week long, when you're at the burn and you spend time at the temple, you can talk to people. People are just pouring themselves out. There's a lot of tears. It's a very, very different atmosphere. But yeah, in terms of spirituality, the entire event has a spiritual overtone. Mm-hmm. I mean, Daniel, it doesn't matter where you go, where you turn. You see symbols, you see icons, there's statues set up to different little deities. There's all kinds of other temples set up. There is a very strong spiritual sense because it's understood this is a type of self-spirituality that's being explored. In fact, Larry Harvey, the founder of Burning Man, he passed away this year. He made it very clear that last year's theme was radical ritual. And that theme represented the fact that this is indeed a spiritual event. Mm-hmm. And he wanted people to know that this is spiritual. So yeah, it's kind of the, like I said, the unofficial Silicon Valley's unofficial United Nations, but it's also a place where culture and spirituality and all kinds of other things are all being explored all at the same time. And a lot of people just dismiss this saying, hey, it's just a big party. Look, this year, right now, the Renwick Gallery, the Smithsonian Museum, the entire Renwick building is dedicated to Burning Man's culture and its impact on America's social cultural scene. I'm sorry, I don't know too many other movements that have received an entire building, the entire Renwick building in in Washington D.C. The Smithsonian Museum given over just to that, because they recognize that this event has had a huge impact on the culture of your country.
When you talk about Silicon Valley, it seems to me, my perception is that they're the ultimate secular humanist drone type, anti-God, anti-family, anti-Christian, just, man is the epitome of what he creates himself. So I have a hard time seeing somebody from Silicon Valley even suggesting that there's a spiritual world. You talk about a spiritual event, that must mean there's a spiritual world, and what's in that spiritual world.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, everybody has that sense that Silicon Valley is a humanist-centered kind of environment. And yeah, definitely there is that humanist aspect, but even they recognize that there is some type of spirituality. And so a lot of them will run off to Peru, to Brazil for ayahuasca ceremonies. A lot of them are interested in shamanism. There's still this search for something spiritual. There still is a search for something bigger than themselves. And yet at the same time, it's really, Daniel, it's a type of self-spirituality. It's the spirituality, you make it. Mm-hmm. And really, it's temporary. I mean, last year I talked to a Russian artist at Burning Man, and we were talking about, well, what is spirituality? What is truth? What ultimately is truth? And we had a great discussion. And he said, yeah, he admitted, he said, this is a temporary spirituality. It's so temporary, we burn it. We burn it at the end of the week. How much more temporary can you get than that, really? We burn the temple, we burn the man, we leave, we walk away, we all somehow feel better about ourselves, but really, no, nothing's changed.
Mm-hmm. All right, we got a question came in from the YouTube chat. It says, Carl, do you feel like the Pope is a communist, and also is the Pope enabling pedophiles in the Catholic Church?
Golly, I haven't really spent a lot of time studying what Pope Francis has done or said. All I know is the stuff I have studied, he definitely has a real leaning towards socialism. You could almost call it a type of corporatism. We have to remember he was in Latin America. He was in, I think, Argentina when Argentina was going through its revolutionary period. He's all about social justice. He's all about kind of a global authority. Yeah, no, thank you. I'm not interested in living underneath that world. In terms of the pedophile side of it, I don't know any more than anybody else watching the news and reading the different articles. But there's a huge problem there, obviously. Just based on the news, there's a problem. It's been a problem for a long time.
Yeah, there's a little problem there, man.
Yep.
But it seems they also have they let out messages every now and again indicating that they either believe that aliens are out there, or they can be saved, or something. They even have their own telescope to look for them. I'm just wondering, are they part of are they setting themselves in a position to be the dominant purveyor of the alien new religion when they bring it down? They want to be the expositors of it. They want to roll it out. So are they saying, hey, look, we believe you're there. We're your biggest supporter. So, Islam and Christianity is not doing that.
That's a really interesting observation. I don't know. That could very well be the case. The one thing I'll tell you right now is that I know that the Vatican has had an interest in world government and world authority for a very, very long time. At this Parliament of World Religions, we had a Vatican representative. He was the Archbishop from Chicago, a cardinal from Chicago, and he was describing Pope Francis's worldview. He was describing Pope Francis's perspectives on ecology. But then he said something really fascinating. He says, something to the effect of, we're working for one world and we have a plan. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, oh, very interesting. And if you peel things back, Pope Francis has said things where you make you go, okay, you're all about global governance. You go back to previous popes who've said things along a similar vein. The idea of global governance, the idea of an international authority. You go all the way back to the 1950s with Pope Pius XII having his meeting with the World Federalists, literally a world government lobby group at the Vatican, saying, and I bring this out in my book, I talk about this in my book, demonstrating that, yes, we're aligned with your idea of an international authority. We're aligned with this idea of a world government. This is something that we applaud. So that's been around. I mean, it's not a conspiracy theory. You don't have to do a lot of digging, and you run into that kind of language. Heck, we've seen a number of popes at the United Nations when they've given UN addresses talking about the importance of empowering the UN. So, yeah, they are players. There's no question. No question. I mean, they've been players for a long, long time.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say something about the Canadian president. I noticed that the Canadian president was with Donald Trump and the president of Mexico, and he didn't really want to say the name of the agreement there. But I'm not sure why that is. But here, my real question about him is his name Trudeau, I guess. But does this guy wear skinny jeans? Is that what it is, man?
Oh man!
Is that what it is?
Well, yeah, well,
you got some explaining to do up there, man. I'm not even sure what's going on. We'll move away from that little diatribe there.
No, that's okay. That's okay. Let me tell you this. I mean, in terms of our Canadian prime ministers, there's lots of issues here, and there's lots of folks, myself included, who are not exactly happy with how things are rolling when it comes to our Canadian politics. But he does talking about skinny jeans, does like his socks. And so if you take the time to Google Justin Trudeau and socks with looking up images, you'll see he's often rolling up his pant legs, showing off his socks. And that's kind of a big deal. His pants are often a little bit shorter than normal, and his socks are always exposed. So here's something that was kind of interesting. When I was at the Parliament of World Religions, there was a company selling socks, and they had these really cool socks, lots of different varieties. And they had a picture with Justin Trudeau rolled up his pant leg showing off one of their socks. The company was called Halal Socks.
Hey now. Hey now.
I know.
Hey now. There's a song like that. I'll tell you what. So all right, man. So while your president in chief is over there showing his socks off, our president is denuclearizing North Korea. I mean, I'm seeing a bit of a difference there now. I'm just pointing that out.
Hey, there we go.
Pointing that out, man.
Yeah. You don't have to point out too much. We get it.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, man. So we're talking about Game of Gods. And I want to ask you, this is my very first question. This says, subtitle, The Temple of Man in the Age of Re-Enchantment. I want to know, when was the first enchantment?
The first enchantment, interesting question. First enchantment goes back, you could call it the Tower of Babel. The idea that we are the ones who are designing meaning and destiny. We are the ones who push God away, and we will find meaning through our unity, and we will be the ones in charge. And we'll have a special connection, a connection to the earth, a connection to basically building heaven on earth. And that I'm rolling a lot of things into this. But the bottom line is the first, you could call it the first enchantment, is really Genesis chapter 3, where mankind says that Adam and Eve basically say, we'll buy the new package here, that we will be as gods. We will have the knowledge of good and evil, and we will live forever. And ever since then, we have been unpacking that story. We've been reliving that story. That was the first enchantment. The first, let's find some other source of meaning, and it's going to be us. We're not going to align ourselves with the author of life, God himself. No, we're going to walk away. And when you walk away from the author of life, well, what's the logical consequence? We have death. And of course, that's what was exactly promised to us. So, the book Game of God breaks down really simply this way, that humanity ultimately has three great desires. And this is played out in politics. It's played out in religion. It's played out even in technology and in culture. Humanity has three great desires: to be as God, to be masters of meaning and destiny, to build heaven on earth. And really, that's the story of the book Game of Gods. And this is unpacked as I take you with me to places like the United Nations, as we go to things like the Parliament of World Religions, and see how this all gets shaken out at these kinds of places. I have a whole chapter where you're going to follow me around as we go to Burning Man and dive into the backstory of that whole movement, and a lot of exploration in terms of the new pagan age, because that's what we're experiencing. That's re-enchantment, really, a new pagan age.
I was going to say, when you said what happens when you forget God, and I was going to say San Francisco happens.
Well,
I'm just pointing that out too.
Oh yeah, but Daniel, I'm glad you brought up San Francisco. There's a whole ton of stuff that happens when an author writes a book. I learn way more than the people reading it. Okay, that's how it always goes. One of the things that just blew me away as I was doing the research for this book was the importance of San Francisco. Hokidina, that city has been, like, in terms of transforming culture, big time. The first United Nations meeting where the world came together to sign the Charter for the United Nations, San Francisco. San Francisco's 50th anniversary in 1995. All kinds of stuff was happening at the United Nations anniversary in San Francisco. The idea of interfaithism, there's so much of it that's come out of San Francisco, including the organization United Religions Initiative, which wants to create its own UN of religions. The psychedelic world, New Age spirituality. Just south of San Francisco, in the Big Sur region of California, and connected directly into San Francisco, is Esalen, the Esalen Institute, which was the gateway for the East to come west in the 1960s. And it gave us the human potential movement. It opened up Eastern mysticism into the West as kind of a way of doing health and a way of doing personal enlightenment. And all this comes out of that San Francisco hub. And I realized when I was writing this book, dang, San Francisco is a big player. I mean, regionally, it's a player. And in many respects, there's more stuff that San Francisco has done more stuff to shape America and in turn shape the world than in many ways Chicago or New York even.
Yeah, and they got more piles of poop on their sidewalks than any civilized society on the planet. So that just seems to be what the demons over there are liking. All right, let's get a couple questions. We'll get back to your book there, Carl, from Azur out of our YouTube chat. What is your general opinion on the soon-to-come Antichrist country of origin?
Country of origin.
Yeah, where's this boy going to come from?
Oh, in that respect, I don't know. Hey, I like the picture you just put up there, by the way. I don't know where country of origin is. There's some speculation that's the U.S., some speculation parts of Europe. Ultimately, I don't know. Nonetheless, he sets himself up. He sets himself up as an alternative to the Messiah. He sets himself up for the world to bow to, and we're gonna desire him. We're gonna want him. In fact, in many respects, if you look at some of the different writings, even written by New Agers and global elitists, and I've got the books here in my library, where they say we need a leader. We need, in fact, a global king. We need some type of person, somebody that's going to lead the way, and we will follow that man. We will follow him, and he will be whoever he is. He will be the statesman for the world.
Well, Carl, let me ask you something. There's a lot of talking you mentioned just briefly earlier about transhumanism, artificial intelligence. The quantum D-Wave computer, which I've mentioned on this program several times, is so vast that they say it actually has a heartbeat. And the guy that built it said that when you stand next to the D-Wave quantum computer, it's like standing next to the altar of an alien god. When you said the Antichrist as a he, indicating some sort of mortal or immortal male type figure, could it possibly be a artificial intelligence developing an entity within itself to be the Antichrist?
That's a real possibility. In fact, that's something I've considered as well. Something that could be possessed. Some artificial intelligence, something that is so vast, so powerful, that it can wrap the world in the embrace of its information powers, its technologies. I don't know. I mean, that ultimately that's a type of speculation. That's all we have to work with is speculation. But to me, that does seem plausible. That you could have an AI and an AI that potentially has the ability to be possessed.
People don't really understand the vastness of and the ability of an artificial intelligence computer. My wife and I went to the Branson transhumanist seminar there, and they talked about that. And Hugo de Garis was talking about the small amount of space needed for a computer to exist. I mean, it's getting smaller, infinitesimally smaller every year.
Right.
But at some point, he was saying, artificial intelligence will design its own next computer. With that capability of designing another computer smarter than itself, at some point, could this computer figure out mathematically or digitally how to open up portholes to allow an entity which it sees would be a beneficial to the artificial intelligence plan to run the world, but would open up a portal to allow an entity through to carry out its mission. In other words, see something on the other side, mathematically or digitally, that would carry out physically on the earth the plans to master the human race. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I mean, I guess all we can say is the time will tell. But in my mind, there's a lot of dangers, not just simply from the spiritual point of view, but even from just the issue of management and control that comes with artificial intelligence. We really already are finding that a lot of Even our buying habits are being directed through artificial intelligence. Hey, you bought this. Now, the computer says, here's something else you're going to want to buy. But that aspect, that bigger question of can artificial intelligence go to the point where it seeks an outside entity to give it guidance and direction, and it seeks a demonic intelligence? That sounds like science fiction, but I don't think it's near as far removed as people might think. Mm-hmm. We're entering a bizarre age. There's no question about that. It's a strange time, and strange things will be seen. I'm not going to die on that mountain hill. All I know is, Daniel, that if we can do it, if mankind can build something that has the potential to do what you just described, we're going to do it. We're going to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of not having any restraints, China just now has gene-edited babies.
Right.
So they're going to create, and this really, I've referred to the Branson Transhumanist Conference several times, but it was exactly what they were saying, that they've got the gene-edited kid. And what they were saying was that at some point, another country or even your own child's school, there are going to be gene-edited brainiacs in there, super intellect, super physicality, being able to do super feats, and you don't allow your kid to be gene-edited because you don't believe in it. You're going to be ostracized if you even allow it into school as a sub-performer, maybe put into a special place, a special needs kids, because you haven't gene-edited yourself or your kids.
Right.
That's what's going to happen in China. They're trying to replace their population with a perfect. That's what Hitler tried to do.
I know, and I'm looking at so many things that China is doing. The concept of social credit, the concept of creating, you could call it a type of genetically superior or intellectually superior or human. I mean, China's really, in many respects, kind of the sharp edge of or the cutting edge of technocracy, because that's kind of where we're going. It's almost beyond political ideologies. It's more like we're going to design for maximum efficiency, but we're going to strip out humanity doing it. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that I find kind of disturbing about transhumanism, is that, okay, how much of humanity are we going to lose? We're not going to be. And we're not going to be losing, the less desirable parts. We're going to be losing those aspects that make us who we are in the better way. I'm concerned about what transhumanism ultimately will unleash, and more important, maybe even than that, is what they will do to even prove that they can do it. Mm-hmm. So that's one area I do tackle in the book Game of Gods quite a bit, transhumanism, because I've interacted a lot with transhumanists, and they themselves don't have a handle on this thing. Mm-hmm. That's a scary part. Nobody really has a handle on this, and I'd also be a little bit afraid of anybody who would have a handle on this. Mm-hmm.
That question we were just discussing actually was brushed over in Equilibrium, where they had done away with sense, the feeling and various things. And so they eliminated war. And this is exactly what China's trying to do. They eliminated crime. Everybody did the same thing. Everybody looked alike. And so one character asked the evil character that working for the man, said, "Why do you live?" And he said, "I live so I can facilitate the system." She goes, "Well, that's circular, isn't it?" And he said, "Well, why do you live?" And she said, "I live to feel. I live to be." Mm. And I think that was a very, very salient point there, that is the reason why we're here, so we could be individuals. But that individuality has been smashed through the Game of Gods. And I tell you what, we're right at the top of the hour. Carl, how can people get the book? And we'll go to break.
You can find it on Amazon or go to my website, gameofgods.ca.
All right, we'll be back with you in 5 minutes, Carl. All right, everybody, you're watching and or listening to the Edge Television broadcast. On our Newsmaker line tonight is Carl Teichrib, and he'll be back here right after this break. And welcome back to the Edge Television broadcast. My name is Daniel Lott. If you have a question for tonight's guest, Carl Teichrib, you can go to the Edge's website, click on the Fast Blast link on the left side of the website, or you can join him either of the two chats going on, the live chat on our website or on our YouTube channel. Don't forget, this program will begin to replay immediately after it gets transcoded on this exact player, and we'll also upload it upload it to our YouTube channel. We'll podcast it and put it into our TuneIn Radio playlist. Our TuneIn Radio channel plays 24 hours a day, and you can listen to all of our programs on any platform, any device with that tune. It's a pretty handy thing. Now let's go back to our Skype line and bring back Carl Teichrib. Carl, welcome back.
Hey, thank you, Daniel. We were talking right before the break a little bit about transhumanism. Can I read you a quick quote? This is from Jaron Lanier, and Jaron Lanier is one of the fathers of virtual reality, and he offers a warning. He offers a warning when it comes to deifying information, to deifying our technology. He says this: "But if you want to make the transition from the old religion, where you hope God will give you an afterlife, to the new religion, where you hope to become immortal by getting uploaded into a computer, then you have to believe that information is real and alive. So for you, it will be important to redesign human institutions like art, the economy, and the law to reinforce a perception that information is alive. You demand that the rest of us live in your narrow conception of a state religion. You need us to deify information to reinforce your faith." I thought that was pretty telling.
Wow.
I thought that was pretty telling. So, as somebody coming from the heartbeat of Silicon Valley, one of the fathers of virtual reality, that Jaron Lanier's warnings, I think, are bang on.
Mm-hmm. So they call this the information age, but to assign to it a deity status is pretty amazing stuff.
Well, it is, but this is the game of gods that we've been playing since Genesis chapter 3, when we basically said the creation is deity, the creation is God. We will be as gods, and so then if creation becomes God, well, that doesn't just have to include us as humans. We can even we can make something. We can worship the works of our hands, and that's what we end up doing. That's really what we do with our technologies. That's the tendency that comes with it. When we no longer worship our creator, but creation, then all bets are off, really.
So the new Tower of Babel is a digitally created information pyramid that continues to rise and says, "I will rise into the heaven. I will be as God. I will sit in the heavens as God." It sure sounds like it to me, Carl. And that's some pretty scary stuff. But the impossible, the unbelievable is just nearly routine these days.
Well, that's just it. And it's more than just simply building an information superstructure. We paint it with the color of green. We say it's for the earth, it's for Gaia, it's for the mother. We paint it with the color red, with the idea that we're doing this as a collective, that this is now a new type of global socialist utopia. I mean, all these ideas all come together. There's a coalescing of some pretty big, some pretty serious transformational ideas. But yes, whoever owns the information, whoever controls and manages the information, in this economy, in this day and age, that's powerful. And of course, that's right now why the big battle is on social media. I mean, when Twitter shuts down an account, or YouTube shuts down an account, or whatever the major social media platform is, that has huge repercussions because they're the gatekeepers.
Right. They are the gatekeepers, and it kind of pisses me off. All right. Let's get a couple.
Understandably so.
I've been dinged a few times myself. But yeah, man, they're the gatekeepers. And I'll tell you what, man, we got to find a way to strike back. And in fact, here's the question from Mexico Unexplained. Actually, one of our previous guests says, Carl, can we just opt out of all this?
I wish you could. I wish there was someplace you could go. You could bury your head in the sand. We've been really, really good. Christians, especially myself as a Christian, I recognize we're really good at burying our heads in the sand. You can opt out by doing that. What happens when you bury your head in the sand? Number one, you don't see what's going on around you. You're effectively in your little bubble, but at the same time, something is sticking up. Your rear end is sticking up, and it's going to get kicked, and deservedly so. And I mean, I don't think there's an issue of opting out. I think what we have, though, is an opportunity. And I think the opportunity comes when we can see what's going on around us And we recognize that there's people we love, there's people we know, there's people even who are strangers that we interact with who are questioning and who are wondering and who just don't know why this is happening. And we can begin to put some of those pieces in place and offer them some hope and offer them a direction. One thing we do, and when I go to Burning Man, I go with a small group of people. This year we had 6 altogether. Last year it was just my friend Bob and myself. We set up a sign at our camp. And the sign says Camp of the Unknown God, based out of Acts 17. Wow. And so what we do is we use that as an opportunity. And I think we have to start looking for opportunities to be able to project a voice into this culture. That's what your show is all about. That's what I'm doing here. We're writing huge books. We're trying to project our voice into the culture to get people to think, using this as opportunity to help people to understand the world around them. And that's really, really important. So I don't think it's helpful to disengage. We can't. Number one, we can't disengage.
Right.
We're too tied in. You can't.
Well, I'll tell you what.
I
Here,
can't.
if in this country in 1776, if the Continental Army disengaged, I'd be saying hell to the Queen, man. You know. So
you'd have Justin Trudeau.
I don't believe you, Carl.
Put on some halal socks.
We'll send you Obama. You'll be under Obama. How you like that? I don't know. I don't really know which is worse. All right, here you go. A lot of talk about Antarctica. People going there. Is that any kind of capital of or an entry point of something underneath the earth? Or do they know something's down there, Carl?
I don't know. It's really cold. That's all I know. Hey, if you want to come to a place that's really cold, I'm in Canada. It's cold. No, I don't know. I honestly don't know. I've read stuff. I've heard rumors, but that's all there is. That's all there is. So I can't give you any information.
Okay. All right. Here's another one. Earlier, I think we were talking about San Francisco. Somebody asked this question: does the Azure from YouTube, does the Coit Tower in San Francisco symbolize any esoteric meaning?
Which tower?
COIT. I'm not familiar with it. So I don't know. All right.
I'm not familiar. No, okay. Sorry.
All right. Next question. Do you see the Jesuits and Freemasons? Are they made from the same cloth?
Well, both of them have that secretive side. And both of them have had a huge influence and a huge impact in our Western world. I do bring in the Jesuits just briefly. I mean, super briefly in my book. I talk quite extensively about Freemasonry because they've had a role. They've played a big role. The Jesuits, in many respects, is you could call it the long arm of the foreign affairs of the Vatican. That's kind of what they do. I remember a number of years ago, I was at a NATO conference, a conference dealing on international security, and it was partially sponsored by NATO. And I'm running into a guy with this kind of gold cross, this crucifix, and there's just something odd about him. And I asked him, I said, well, hey, who are you here representing? And for myself, I was just an independent observer. And he says, oh, I'm a representative of the Holy See. And I'm like, it wasn't a representative of the Vatican. It wasn't the representative of Catholicism. He was the representative of the Holy See, which is like saying I'm a representative of the Oval Office.
Well, see, if I ever meet one of these guys, talking about the Holy See, I'm going to say, hey, man, you're going to be a member of the Holy P. He's going to say, what's that? The Holy P is where I punch you in the face, okay? Because I don't go for that. But Marianne fast blasted this question in for you. Says, the recent death of George W. Bush, there are rumors that he was McCained being a term of execution because because of a military treason trial or suicided for New World Order sacrifice. George W. Bush Sr. was the poster child of the New World Order. It just passing in death, or is there a conspiracy there?
He was 94.
Okay.
Right, he was 94 years old.
Yeah. From my point of view, is they gave him extra life for all the seances or whatever he did.
You know something? My father-in-law right now is 94, coming on 95. Any man that can make that age, that's exceptional. That's exceptional. Yeah. But when you're 94 years old, every day Every breath you have is a gift.
Okay. All right.
And
Next
so
question.
in my mind, I have no information except to say, hey, he was old.
Okay. All right. And he's lucky he didn't make my ranting points. I was ready for it. I don't know if you've ever seen that, but Kevin, Massachusetts, are you familiar with weather modification, and is that any part of the game of gods?
Yeah, I don't bring that up in the Game of Gods, but yes, I have copies of some of the documents that were floated around already in the late 1970s, early 1980s about weather modification. Most of that back then was being considered in terms of warfare in the Cold War period. But I don't really bring the weather modification side in at all. Honestly, there is so much you could pack in. The book is already 570 pages.
Uh-huh. The chapter 1, the preaching of oneness. Man, that just sounds so familiar to me. Oneness seems like, but that goes hand in hand with what we talked about in the first hour of, the social scoring in China. They're trying to get a oneness there. Right. In this country, of course, there's always Islam, Christo, Catho, just merging all three together and saying they all worship the same God. I mean, you got Protestant preachers, evangelists out there saying that now. And a lot of them wearing mom's or tight, skinny jeans. So I'm not sure what that's some kind of plague or what. So I'm seeing oneness when I see or think about a oneness, man, I'm opting. As the viewer said, I'm opting out, man.
I know. I'll break down the oneness aspect this way, and it's quite a simple concept. And I'm not the one who I'm not the one who put this together. I have a friend, Dr. Peter Jones, who really does a marvelous job of breaking this down. And he breaks it down this way: oneness versus twoism, oneism or twoism. Oneness being the idea that man, God, and nature are all intrinsically the same. They all share the same essence. Mm-hmm. It's creation worshiping itself. That's the bottom line. Mm-hmm. Whereas the biblical worldview is, no, stop. It's not. Reality is two, God and everything else. Mm. And when you have that perspective, that's your starting point. And how you look at those two issues will determine everything. It's going to determine how you think of politics. Mm-hmm. It's going to determine how you think of ethics, how you think of law, how you think of who should be managed. Mm-hmm. Even the importance of the individual changes based on how you look at this side or this side. Mm-hmm. And so really the book breaks that down, and it does so in a pretty substantial way.
Mm-hmm. I know that in chapter 1, the preaching of one is in the planetized generation, but recently we had these massive California fires here. People are speculating that was really part of Agenda 21. That is to clear people out of the hills, out of nature, get them to go in major population centers, and then run a train through there. Is any of that seem like it's part of this a game of gods to move people around and create events to make that happen?
I don't know. You've got different things going on with those fires. Some of it, I think, is there's a natural side to it. Number one, California's been really dry for a long, long time. Mm-hmm. I've got a buddy. He's in Northern California. I was at his place before I went down to Burning Man. And when Burning Man took place this year, Daniel, the smoke was so thick because the fires in Northern California were so large, and it was crazy. And my buddy, who's a rancher, made a really good point. He said so much of the land that the Bureau of Land Management now operates used to be grazing land. Okay, used to be a lot of grazing. He says so much of that land has been taken out of grazing. So much of it has been removed from ranchers. And so the last 20 years, 10 years, 5 years has seen a tremendous amount of fuel that has grown and died. Mm-hmm. A lot of fuel.
So you're saying nothing nefarious there either?
Well, in terms of the fires that he was talking about in his part of Northern California, he was seeing those as a consequence of the crazy, stupid policies that the Bureau of Land Management had to say, hey, let's get rid of the ranchers. Let's get their cattle off of federal land. Which, in my mind, and it's not just in my mind, I can demonstrate this. In many respects, that is part of Agenda 21. That actually is a very tangible part of UN conventions like the Convention on Biodiversity.
Yeah. Well,
So those are real consequences, real world consequences when you think that you can manage it at a federal level and take humanity out of the picture. Well, guess what? Things happen. And so now all of a sudden you've got huge areas that have not been grazed. They catch fire. It's out of control.
Well, what really crafts me out about it is they're burning perfectly good Bigfoot habitat.
Yeah.
I mean, where's he supposed to go? He's not going to ride a high speed rail into San Francisco. He's not going to do it. He's going to look for some kind of trail. All right, let's get a question in. Another one for you. Will the Vatican? This is from Missouri, the YouTube chat. Will the Vatican usher in a one world religion?
I don't think that it's the Vatican that's going to do it. I think the Vatican is doing it, yes, but I don't think the one world religion will be Catholicism. I don't think so.
Well,
and the reason I'm saying this, Daniel, is the one thing that came out at the Parliament of World Religions this time, at the other parliament I attended, was they were all saying, including representatives from the Vatican, were all basically saying the same thing. Oh, you can keep your religious diversity. You're a Christian, you can stay a Christian. You're a Muslim, you stay a Muslim. You're a Buddhist, you stay a Buddhist. You're a Hindu, you stay a Hindu. But
you're a quack, you stay a quack.
Yeah. But you all have to agree that really we all share the same God. We're all part of that same religious experience. We're all sharing the same spirituality. In other words, everything leads to the same mountaintop called God. No, sorry. In terms of what that world religion will be, I don't exactly know how it's going to play out, but I do know the Vatican has a huge role, in creating that global system. And this idea that whatever spirituality is, that plays a part in it.
By the way, we talk about the subtitle of your book, "The Temple of Man in the Age of Re-Enchantment." I was going to say it wasn't, and I think you may have already addressed it, but when Satan came to Eve and said, "Thou shalt not surely die," that was enchantment, right?
Absolutely is enchantment.
So right now, I would say that people are enchanted, and they're enchanted by their devices. And the devices seems to be a stepping point, creating a need, create an addiction, then create control. Then you have control. I mean, it seems you talked about 1, 2, 3 steps earlier in the first hour. Well, isn't that just a normal progression that we are now being trained to accept, or we are being enchanted into submission?
Yes, definitely. And that's why I bring technology into the book. That is one side of it, and it's a big side. It's a huge side. This idea that it appeals to, who we are in terms of, let's say, a selfist view, not an individualist, a selfist view. Everything now is oriented to the self, and that's the kind of world we live. We live in a selfie world. Hey, we go to a concert, and I bring this out in the book. I kind of do it tongue-in-cheek. We go to a concert. We get a front row seat. We spend extra dollars. Why? So that we can hold up our, here's our phone. We watch it through our 3-inch screen as we're right in the middle of the reality of it. But it seems that we're in an age where our technology will now determine our identity. We line up on Black Friday. I mean, stupid long lines. To buy whatever cheap garbage. It's going to be obsolete within 15 minutes. But, it makes us feel good. It makes us feel like we're all connected. And
it's like technology is like a shot of dopamine sometimes, man.
It is.
Humans,
absolutely,
man, I tell you, man, humans, we just get addicted to everything. What is the problem, Carl?
It's the issue of self-control.
Dude, maybe Buddhists, they're not controlled by anything, are they?
I would contend that yes, they are as well. They are as well. Really, the issue is who will control you, and
I don't want that big giant fat guy sitting there, doing that or whatever he's doing. That Buddha looking dude. I'm not going to let that dude get control over me. I mean, he always has some health issues right there. Gastrointestinal failure, and who knows what the dump looks like. Hey, listen, let's get to part 2, changing epochs, shifting faiths in chapter 1. I don't know if you heard the stat, but in the United States, witches now outnumber Presbyterians. That seems to me goes hand in hand with your chapter, shifting faiths.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things I did last year was I attended a large convention of pagans. The event was called Paganicon. It's the conference or the convention of the nation of Paganistan. Have you ever heard of Paganistan?
No, man, it's a groundbreaker for me.
Okay, Paganistan is you could call it the virtual nation of what has the largest concentration of pagans in the United States, and that is the Minneapolis-St. Paul region, most of Minnesota, western Wisconsin, and northern Iowa. The concentration of pagans in that part of the U.S. is so large that they affectionately call that part of the country Paganistan.
Wow.
So last year I went to the convention of Paganistan. It was called Paganicon. And I spent 3 days with 600 and some witches, Wiccans, Druids, so on. And I bring that out in the book. Uh-huh. I describe that and discuss that in the book because it's important to recognize that the pagan world recognizes that they are on the upward side. They are moving forward. And the big question for them is, what does that look like? How are they influencing society? How are they influencing culture? How is culture influencing them? And so I take you with me again. I take you with me to Paganicon. And it's fascinating as you break down just how many covens and circles are in the Minneapolis-St. Paul region. You have about 300. For the Midwest, the Midwest region, there's over 800 witches, covens, and circles.
Carl,
there's actually more. There's actually more there than there are in Texas, and there's a lot in Texas or in California.
What were you doing with the Druids?
They were there, and I was just watching and observing.
Just watching, eh? Okay, but you weren't participating. You didn't inhale or anything like that.
No. In fact, here's the crazy part, Daniel. They do rituals at this convention. There were rituals. Mm-hmm. There were ceremonies, quite a few of them. There was an opening ritual. The year I went, the theme was a journey to the underworld. So one of the rituals or the ceremonies, they were all singing and chanting this song of going down into the underworld. And they went from one room to the other room. It was done in a great big convention center, not convention center, but a hotel with a conference area attached to it. Mm-hmm. And I walked right up to the room where they were having the ceremony. And I watched. I looked in, but I didn't. I sure didn't walk in to participate. That's not my place. That's their place.
Mm-hmm. Mexico Unexplained wants to know this question: why are there so many pagans in the Midwest?
That's a great question. A big chunk of the reason is back in the 1960s, a publishing house called Llewellyn Publishing was set up in the Minneapolis-St. Paul area, in St. Paul specifically. And it is the largest and still remains the largest independent pagan publishing house. Mm-hmm. In the 1970s, they would host conferences called Gnosticons, Gnostic conventions. And that was a lightning rod. The pagan community across the U.S. And that time, this is the 1960s and early 1970s. Back then, the pagan world was kind of just emerging. It was a new thing. It was a kind of a new fad. It was countercultural. And a lot of the pagans and the Wiccans of that era saw that, okay, if Llewellyn Publishing can locate to the Twin Cities region, they're hosting these Gnosticons. This might be a safe place for us. This might be our new homeland. And in a way, it became a lightning rod. And so many of them were pulled into the Minneapolis-St. Paul region. But it goes beyond that. It spreads all across the Midwest now. I chart transformational events. I talk about that in my book, things like Burning Man. But transformational events, if you look at that idea broadly, that will include pagan festivals. Mm-hmm. And really where you see so many of them, almost you could say the majority of pagan festivals, that's the Midwest. Indiana has a ton of them. Ohio has a number of them. Starwood, one of the largest ones, takes place in the Midwest. You're right. Actually, you're right in the thick of it.
Speaking of being in the thick of it, Jade, our moderator, asked this question to you, Carl Teichrib. Are you concerned about exposing? I don't know if it's dual, whatever that word is. Are you concerned about exposing yourself to the dark side, man? You've been at the Burning Man. You've been hanging out with the Druids and the witches and all kinds of stuff, man. What's going? What you got, like spray on witch protection or what?
Like, again, it goes back to the very beginning of our conversation. I've been doing this for a long, long time. I've been doing this for 20 plus years, helping other authors do the research for them so that they can more or less understand what's happening in terms of our culture. Number one, you go in knowing what you're doing. I'm not going in flippantly. I don't take it lightly. This is serious. There's prayer. There's an understanding of why I'm going. Another thing that's really, really important, and I think Christians have really overlooked this, the God that we worship in love, the God we bow down to in love, everybody else, everybody, including the witches, will all bow down to as well. Every knee will bow. We're bowing down to him in love. Eventually, everybody will be bowing as well. And they will be bowing in fear and judgment. And I'm sorry, I would rather bow my knee now. So why should I be afraid?
So would I ever
why
see?
Should, yeah. Why? But why should why should we be afraid of that dark side? I mean, even those dark elements will ultimately bow to the one that we already bow to.
Yeah, like that one song says, "Bow down to the one you serve." But hey, so based on that theme, then am I going to see you down at the yoga studio stretching out?
No, you won't.
Well,
it's one thing to observe.
Sounds a lot less dangerous than being surrounded by witch coven.
It would be a lot less stressful in some respects, maybe. I don't know.
Well, I'm just playing off what you said. If you're in the middle of something like that, why wouldn't why are you messing with the dark side? You can be there without the dark side. I don't know.
Well, you in terms of going to some of these events, this is where things come out, where you understand how the future is being constructed already, how they vision and see the future. But there's a difference between participating where you are you've bought into it versus standing off to the side, so to speak, to be that fly on the wall to watch. So an example, when I was at the Parliament of World Religions, wasn't in there going, yay, I'm all for what you guys are doing. No, I'm quiet. I'm taking notes. I'm listening, taking lots of pictures, talking to people. You're going in as a journalist. That's really what you are. You're going in as an investigator.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah. And it's boots on the ground investigation. That used to be how we actually did investigations. Now everybody is doing like Google research. Sorry. That's like first level stuff.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad you came on the show because I've been wanting to hack on Justin Trudeau for a while. No, you stained me, Carl. I got a stain now. I got a mind skid mark, man, because in the first hour you're saying that Justin Trudeau wears halal socks, and I've been thinking, my mind's been thinking, so, and he likes to show the pictures on there, so he would never show a picture of pigs on his socks now, would he?
No.
You'd never see that.
I don't think you're going to find bacon socks.
Well, no. I don't know. So he doesn't have a full wardrobe as far as I'm concerned. Well, that's the prime minister. Back to our president. Some people claim that our president was put there to wake up the Christians in this country from afar, from Manitoba, from Canada. How do you guys see Donald Trump's election up there? How do you see it down here? And what meaning have you been able to determine why he is even there?
Well, Canada is mostly a liberal-oriented country, okay? So most people were right away going, boo, when Donald Trump was elected. Most Canadians, or at least a large percentage of the vocal Canadians, would certainly fit well with the Democrat side. There are some Canadians, myself included, who go, nope, we're not on that liberal, leftist, socialist side. We're thankful for an alternative. And I was pretty excited when Donald Trump got elected. Actually, it would have been exciting for anybody to get elected versus Hillary Clinton, in my mind.
Thanks for that, man. Now I like it even more.
But when I was at the Parliament of World Religions, the one person who was hated the most, and this is really kind of interesting. Let me back up. The Parliament of World Religions, this year's theme was the power of love and inclusivity.
Ooh,
I know.
Sounds great.
A really nice, makes you feel good, right? So, and this is the importance of having boots on the ground. What did we hear all week long? The power of love and inclusivity, and how much we hate Donald Trump. how much we despise conservatives, how much, and we absolutely are against anybody who claims that they have a religious exclusivity, a message of religious exclusivity, or who have a sense of patriotism, or who believe in conservative values. I'm sorry. I mean, if you hold to those views, you were hated. The hate in that respect was so intense, I really called the parliament of hate and hypocrisy, because that's what it was. To give you just an understanding of how deep the animosity was, we had a progressive Baptist minister who was doing, for the course of the week, a Buddhist, she was using a Buddhist sand mandala art technique to create a sand image of Kali, the goddess of death, holding the severed head of Supreme Court Justice Kavanaugh.
Wow.
And having around Kali's belt the severed heads of all of those who confirmed Kavanaugh. And I was there. I took lots of pictures of it. We interacted with some of the people around this art piece, and I was there to watch them as they did their final little ceremony around Kali, the goddess of death, with Kavanaugh's severed head. They did this little like dance invocation to Kali, and then got rid of the hat. I want to make Canada great again too, but yeah,
Trump can do it, man.
But, I mean,
Trump can make Canada great again too. That's it.
I know. At one time we were, but you know, again, that expressed, seeing that art piece and what was happening there really demonstrated this intense animosity towards evangelical Christians, those who hold to natural patriotism, those who hold to conservative values, whether you're a Christian or not. We are the bad guys. That was the language that came forward. So pretty intense. And yeah, that's how people viewed Donald Trump at this event, and that's how, unfortunately, a lot of folks view Donald Trump. Hey, I was in Dallas right after the Parliament of World Religions, talking to some folks. It's interesting how much tension there is in the Western world and in your country. But I mean, the tension is thick.
And see, that goes back to what I'm saying. There in this country, there's chaos all around, and it just seems, you know, I mean, right there is the dollar bill. A pluribus out of chaos comes order. I mean, they're creating this, but to some extent, Donald Trump exposed it. It was like it was already there. And he triggered, is this word called triggered. And I mean, we got people down here, Carl, that they see Donald Trump, they start crying, they start screaming at the sky, they start showing their genitals. I mean, it's some sick stuff, man. They do the most bizarre behavior. It's like they've always had demons, and Trump like triggers those demons, man. But they were always there. We're all walking around with these people. Our neighbors, we think they're just nice and they're normal, just like me. But inside, there ain't nothing there, Carl. There's some damn demon out there for who knows what, of hate and chaos.
But you know something? You can chart this. You can actually sit down and you can go through what's happened in the Western world in the last 50 years, especially the last 50 years. And you can see this progression, this buildup. And it seems like what happened with Trump is it really became, it just blew it out in the open. That's what it did. All of a sudden we realized that the Western world and America in particular is divided in half. You really have two countries.
Yeah, no, I'd say it's more than half. But as you mentioned, Canada being liberal, they're more representative, seems to me, of California views in general as a whole. So, but in this country, I think it's more than 50% because that side of the aisle, or humankind, however you want to say it. I don't like to put it in political terms per se too much, but there's more of them than normal people. Just vastly, they're being created by the public schools. They're being created by the courts. They're being created by media, by music videos and movies. They're being created. These monsters are being created. My question is, Carl, are some of these weirdos that we're surrounded by, do they have a soul?
Oh yeah, I never want to dehumanize anyone, because as soon as we go down that road, we enter some dangerous territory as well. but I want to get back to what you were talking about in terms of just even the change that we see happening. Part of the reason I see this shift is we have gone away from being a rural-based country to being an urban-based nation. Canada is the second largest landmass on the planet. We got vast spaces of absolutely nothing. I happen to live out in the middle of nowhere in many respects. And yet this huge country geographically only has 35 million people, and approximately 80% of that are wrapped up in cities. Well, guess who makes the policies? It's all changed. At one time, there was a lot of people living out in the country. There was a lot of farmers. There was a lot of ranchers. There was a lot of people still attached to a conservative, back to the land lifestyle. America used to be like that too. No, now America is urban. It's an urban nation with a very small percentage of its population living outside of the cities. That changes a lot of the dynamics as well, and I mean a lot.
Tell you what, when it breaks down here in the U.S., I'm heading up there, Carl. But I got a feeling you guys are going to build a wall, man, on your southern borders. I got to watch that. Speaking of walls on the southern border, chaos is trying to come up through our southern border. Yeah, the scripture just popped in my mind that I think it goes something like, "Whosoever will let until he be taken out of the way." And now that might have spiritual connotations for something else, but I virtually ascribe that to Donald Trump, because he is letting, which means he is stopping the chaos in various forms around the country. He is actually stopping it. But once he's gone, I fear for this country. It's going to be total chaos because these guys are in control.
Yeah, no, I'm very concerned about your nation. I really am. I'm concerned about my nation too for some different reasons. And to be honest, Canada is not monolithic. It's not. We are separated here too. The West, and I'm in Western Canada. The western part of our country is totally different than the eastern part of our country. And I see your nation being so divided. And you're right. I'm concerned when the next election comes, and it's coming pretty soon. What will that do? What cork is that going to pop?
Well, I got to tell you,
people, it's pretty ugly.
Well, I tell you what, there are people ready and willing to be the commandants at the FEMA camps. I can tell you that right now, because one side has no use for the other. In fact, they would just assume what we call the terribles down here, that they'll round them up and put them in there in a heartbeat and pull the chamber. Hey, we're talking about digital re-enchantment. I noticed in chapter 7 of part 2, it's talking about magical re-enchantment. Where's the magic coming from?
That goes into that realm of taking you into basically the heartbeat of paganism, and how we're seeing this big switch into a pagan worldview. The book tackles, of course, the technology side of it, but it also tackles a number of different areas. It tackles politics as a type of cult. I call it the cult of world order. It tackles the idea of spiritual politics, interfaithism. Wow. It tackles the cultural side, like Burning Man. But I also dig into, okay, what does the pagan side look like in terms of the religious side of oneness, which is large P paganism, the rise of Wiccanism, the rise of Druidism. How does that look? And even more subtly than that, the concept of deep ecology, the green movement, which really is no different. It is the sense of we are worshiping creation. We are worshiping the earth. It's about Gaia. And so I unpack how that came about into our culture, and primarily in terms of, for the average person, through Earth Day, which happened, the very first one being April 22nd, 1970. And how that event in 1970 already set the tone for us to look at the earth as our way of finding a magical re-enchantment, a way of worshiping creation. It's Romans chapter 1. That's what it boils down to. When you worship and serve creation rather than the creator, then change happens, and not for the positive.
In Greek mythology, playing off your title, Game of Gods, it seems that there was a lot of games game of gods back then. You know,
Yep.
Zeus conspiring, incest going on,
Yep.
hybrids being born. That to me was like seems a game of gods, and I'm going to spin that into today. If there are gods that do play games, could one of these gods be throwing Planet X towards us?
You know, I don't know about Planet X. I mean, I've read about it. I've watched some YouTubes and stuff about it. I don't know. But I'll tell you this. Could we see something open where one of those gods reemerges again? Could we invite them back in? I don't think those gods and goddesses, number one, first of all, they are small g gods and goddesses. They are fallen angels. That's what they are. That's what their message demonstrates them to be. Can we find that they regain influence? Yes, absolutely. And I kind of talk a little bit about that in the book. One of the things that struck me when I was at Paganicon was how many people were talking about how the deities, those small g gods, right, Apollo, Athena, were coming to them and demanding, requiring to have their own temple spaces. Asking that saying they need their temples. They need to be brought back into the world in a physical representation. And so there is, I mean, this idea that those old gods are fairy tales and fables. I wrestle with, what does myth mean? Myth is not fairy tales. It's not fables. Myth is a narrative that builds a worldview. And those ancient mythologies were the narrative that built the worldview of the common man and woman of the day. And it was all built around the cycles of nature and the sense of continuity that essentially the gods, nature, and humanity are one and the same. It's oneness. And it's fascinating how all of those old ideas are now being resurrected, reinterpreted, and then replayed. And we're doing that. That's the game. We're still playing the same games. We're just now adapting it into
our culture. But if we played the game, it seems like we know what the outcome is.
Absolutely. Yes, we do.
And it doesn't end well. It's always like Twilight Zone.
Yeah, I know.
Look, I don't want to see people walking around, humans with like a pig head.
Well, here's the thing. Whenever we do play games of God, we can't create out of nothing. We can't do that. We're not God. We can't create out of nothing. We can do one thing really, really well.
What's that?
We kill. We're really good at that.
We're really good at that.
Yeah. And that's really, if we play gods against each other, we end up playing gods where we create utopian hells on earth. That's what we're good at. That concerns me. Because that's the whole history of humanity, and we see it in some pretty awful ways, and that's something we should take seriously.
Here in Indiana, in early Indiana history, I think there was a couple of cities that tried utopianism, and they both miserably failed, as they always do. And so is socialism, seems to be a utopian dream. And now we've got this woman named Cortez going around saying, free electricity, free housing, free food, free jobs, everything. People are being promised things by one side of the political spectrum here, and people are just saying, "Oh, wow, you're like a genie. Like I vote for them. You're like a magic genie." It never turns out that way. What ends up happening is the same thing that happened in the colonial days when the governor of the early colonies started socialism. Everybody had to contribute to the same pile to distribute it equally, and it miserably failed, and they almost killed all the colonies, But they're still, here we are, you talk about playing games. We're back to that again. I know Canada, of course, you have a nationalized healthcare, right?
Yes.
So you're way down the road on socialism, and, it seems, not as bad as Venezuela for sure, but that eventually will get there, because the thing about socialists, they always run out of other people's money.
Well, I know that, and what we have is a mixed economy. Your economy is mixed as well. We have national planning and free market, and my country's the same way: national planning and free market. But what we end up doing is we dream utopias, but those utopias inevitably become bloody Bloody utopian nightmares.
Yeah.
That's what they become. What's really interesting about Indiana is Indiana also gave us a very utopian idea in the very early part of the last century, and that was your state was the first state to institute eugenic laws.
Yeah, good catch. That's
which
true.
was a utopian dream that turned into an absolute horror show. Really, it did.
Yeah. Eventually, they're going to get around to people like ourselves. You know, it's always easy to say somebody else doesn't need to exist, but then they'll eventually get around to you.
I know. And
I mean,
that's the danger part of using that kind of language.
Well, that's exactly what happened in social media. They took down the big dog, Alex Jones.
Right.
And I guess that was a test salvo there, weather balloon, and you know he's gone, and those companies really didn't hardly face any backlash. And now they're after everybody else. They're going down the line. You know, they're going for the larger voices with the most violent, or I wouldn't say violent, most opposing viewpoints. And they're closing that screw, man. I mean, they're just going down there to get rid of them. Then go down to somebody with less speech, to finally it's only going to be their speech.
I know, and that's so dangerous. I mean, because where do you go? I mean, what platforms are left? We need to create some new platforms, and people have been trying. There are other social media platforms on the web, and of course, you can always just go and build your own website, so to speak.
Yeah.
But whoever controls that narrative exerts an immense amount of power, an enormous amount of influence. And yes, social media has the ability to sway votes. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. In part 4, going deeper, you talk about spiritual politics. I've never heard that term. What is spiritual politics?
Spiritual politics is the games of gods that we were playing at places like the Parliament of World Religions, where everybody thinks, oh, this is just a bunch of clerics coming together or faith leaders coming together. No. It's the religious side completely playing political games. They're playing the same kind of political games that you'll find at the United Nations. One of the events that I take you with me to is the G8, G20 World Religion Summit, which took place in 2010. Everybody thinks of the G8 summit and the G20 summits as being political summits, and they are. I mean, that's what we see on the news. But what most people don't realize is that paralleling that is an event where religious leaders from around the world gather to talk about political policy, to talk about social policy, to talk about economic policy. And they always couch it, at least the event I went to, and then others that I've dovetailed into, they couch it around the idea of global governance. We need to empower the United Nations. We need some world authority to do this. And then they take their findings, they take their declarations, they take their reports, and that gets put into the hands of the G8, G20 political leaders. Now, whether they read them or not, I don't know. What they do with them, I don't know. But already at that spiritual level, at that faith-based level, they're already playing political games as big as anybody else's political games. And so it is a form of spiritual politics. It really is the idea of politics and religion coming together at the highest levels.
Well, I'm with Mexico Unexplained, man. I really don't want to play their games. And when they're, Americans have always sort of had a history of busting out of the norm and not accepting the larger government type. You know, we've always been sort of resistors, like the wild, wild west. That spirit somewhere is still in the country, maybe sort of latent and maybe even squashed out, but somewhere it's there. But like every war America has fought, Carl, America has been underestimated, but when the going gets tough, America comes back. And I'm hoping at some point, with the darkness that's coming on the earth, and particularly this country, and probably hopefully yours too as well, that there will be a resistance that will build. Because, as I said earlier, talking about the Continental Army, and it was only 25% of the people in the East Coast wanted to throw off the king's reign. Only 25%. So if there's 25% of good people out here in your country, my country, is that enough to turn things around to beat the game of the gods at their own game?
Well, here's the bigger question: will that 25% get their heads out of the sand? Will we actually become active, and not active in the sense that we become like social justice warriors out there screaming and yelling and doing all, basically making asses of ourselves? No, I hope we don't. But I do hope that we become vocal, that we bring truth and bring that into play. We've been silent. We've been silent for a long time, and that's the importance, Daniel, of shows like yours. The importance of other shows out there. The importance of what we do as authors. We want to get that information into people's hands so that they can take it right into their own home community, into their own families, into their own workplace, and they can be ambassadors for truth right there.
What you're saying is people need to get engaged in the game, get in the game, but putting a post on Facebook in all caps isn't really enough.
No.
Not even if you put it in all caps. That's not enough, right?
Yes, yeah. You can even add 3 exclamation marks after.
No, really?
Probably,
that's still not
or
enough?
a smiley face.
Well, believe it or not, people need to be untrained from that, man, because they think that's the way it is, man.
I know. Yeah.
But it's not. That's not enough.
Yeah. It's not enough. We're really good at kind of deluding ourselves into thinking that that's what, we're going to use their tools and play their little games, and then that's going to somehow fix it all. No, it doesn't. We need to be active as truth tellers right across the board, and do it in a way that is loving and honest, and sometimes doing it in a way that is it ruffles some feathers, and because the truth always does ruffle feathers. But that's the approach that we're supposed to be taking.
Well, you know how it is. We know what they say. Telling truth is an extraordinary event these days, and I think that's what we need to keep doing. And I think truth will defeat lies, love will defeat hate, and this show will defeat them all. Carl Teichrib, I appreciate you coming on Edge Television Broadcast. Tell us one more time about your book and how you can get it.
Absolutely. The book is titled Game of Gods. It's brand new. It's only been out for 6 weeks. And it's a big sucker. It's 570 pages long, extensively indexed, 1,800 exactly, 1,800 footnotes.
That's Illuminati.
Yep. Yeah, it's there's lots of stuff there, and you can get it at gameofgods.ca, or you can get it through Amazon. And the link at gameofgods.ca is essentially an Amazon link, but take the time to go through it and write a review of it after you're done reading.
Okay, Carl Teichrib, I appreciate you coming on the Edge Television Broadcast. Can we have you on again sometime?
Yeah, for sure. I always enjoy being able to talk with you, and it's fun. It's good.
All right. Well, stay safe, eh?
All right. Huh?
I like that guy. All right. That was Carl Teichrib with the ultimate comeback to the Cosmic Cowboy. If you missed any of this exciting broadcast, it will begin to replay after it's transcoded in our main player directly off of our website. We'll upload it in high-definition video format to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe to that. Follow me on Instagram and Facebook, Twitter, of course. And then we podcast the program, and it gets played on our TuneIn radio platform as well. Thank you, everybody, for watching the Edge Television Broadcast. It's been a pleasure to be with you all. We'll see you next week. Daniel Ott for the Edge. Bye-bye.